Hello everyone, I'm very honored to attend the conference meeting. My topic is the opposition and deconstruction of space and identity in the trend imagery of Tom Wolfe's novel, which including the following parts. Firstly, I will introduce the research background and objectives. As for Tom Wolfe, he is an important American writer of the 20th century, which focused on the growth novels and the theme of self-exploration during social transformation. The trend imagery is a key element in his novel, with multiple attributes of a narrative thread, life metaphor, and catalytic for identity transformation. And under the background of the Great Depression and the industrialization, the spatial mobility and identity recognition are the key propositions for modern individuals. For the research aim is to reveal the role of trend imagery in the binary oppositions of space and identity, so it can understand the artistic question and the ideological depth of Tom Wolfe's novel. As for the literature review, existing studies mostly focus on the symbolic meaning of the trend imagery. For example, the industrial civilization, the flow of the time, the exploration of the unknown, which emphasize the role of trend in plots and themes, but there are some gaps. For example, its lack of the analysis of the complex relationship between space and identity contained in trend imagery. It failed to explore how trend imagery constructs space and affects identity cognition and transformation. In the field study, take opposition and deconstruction of space identity as the core clue to explore the underlying meaning and culture in his novel. So the research methods of this article is using the close reading analysis to analyze the spatial and identity symbols and narrative logic in scenes, dialogues, and psychological descriptions related to trend imagery. And then using the Grimm's semiotic square to analyze binary oppositions and derivative relations of space, such as urban versus rural, physical versus spiritual, and identities such as self versus society. And also this article used the reader's concepts such as difference and deconstruction of binary opposition to explore the role of trend imagery in breaking fixed boundaries and generating pluralistic meanings of his novel. So it comes to the analysis. This article analyzed the trend imagery. Firstly, for example, the distribution and the characteristics. So according to the statistics, the trend imagery occurs in Look Homeward Angel more than 50 times, and there are more than 300 times occurred in Of Time and the River, which covers multiple scenes such as growth process and emotional entanglements and social reality. And for the characteristics, this article gives us a summary of the features of the trend imagery in Tom Wolfe's novel. Firstly, as materiality. So in the novel, the train was described as a black steel behemoth, which symbolized the powerful force of industrial civilization and the invasion of modernity. Secondly, the feature of the train is mobility. The train breaks the geographical restriction and challenging fixed perception of space and identity in his novel. And the third feature of the train is it's a kind of a threshold space which connects past and future, and also self and other. So it serves as a microcosm of society. And then this article analyzed the spatial binaries with Grimm's semiotic square. Now first is the urban-rural binary. The urban and the rural binary can be analyzed using the Grimm's semiotic square like this figure you can see, and it can be derived the oppositions such as prosperity versus tranquility and alienation versus constraint, which forming a more profound matrix of spatial oppositions. So the city derived the characteristics of prosperity and alienation, which constitutes an inherent tense. Now for the protagonist Eugene, the urban space like New York, Boston, which represents prosperity. And this prosperity symbolizes the feature of modernity of mobility, escape from his hometown, Altamont. However, the urban space also harbors alienations. For example, the city also has frozen harshness streets, which make people feel warmless. For the countryside, it derived the characteristic of tranquility and constraint. The tranquility of rural embodies in the hills of Altamont the familiarity of family and the slow rhythm of life. So it represents the tradition, rootedness, and the emotional security which lacks in the urban space. But the rural space is also defined by constraint. For example, his father Gant wanted Eugene to be a statesman, but Eugene would not follow his father. So it reflects the restrictive essence of rural life. And also, there are some judgments come from the rural communities that may show some sense of oppression. So it is interweaved with contradictions between tranquility and constraint. So this internal contradiction equals the complex characteristic of urban spaces. So the train dissolves the urban and rural boundaries by promoting two-way flow of culture and values between the urban and rural areas, and it blurs their boundaries. The second is physical and spiritual spatial boundaries. This second spatial boundary derived concreteness versus abstractness, and oppression versus freedom. So the physical space is characterized by its concreteness. The physical space of the train, like its narrow seats, crowded aisles, and the smell of cool smoke, is defined by the concreteness. However, the physical space also imposed oppression. The crowded condition restrict movement, and the fixed route of the train symbolize the limitation of the physical existence. As for the spiritual space, it is characterized by abstractness and freedom. So when the train moving, the friction between the wheels and the rails become the dividing line between the material and the spiritual. So the protagonist or the characters in the novel, the thought, break free from the constraints of a physical space and extend through memories, imagination, and reflection. So this state of a boundless flow of thought symbolizes the abstractness of spiritual space. Now this spiritual space also represents freedom, and the freedom is made by the train's movement. So the freedom spiritual space enables characters to transcend the limitation of their real-world identities and reconstruct themselves with their inner worlds. So this freedom stands in opposition to the constraint characteristic of a physical space. The rule of the train is to break the rigid opposition between the two through mobility. It serves as a catalytic for spiritual reflection. Next, it also analyzes the identity binaries. The train as a mobile social space, it facilitates the negotiation of the oppositions, and the self and the society form the primary identity binaries, with the authenticity and the conformity and pursuit versus constraint as derivatives. So the authenticity means following one's true inner desire without being constrained by external norms, while the pursuit refers to desire for self-realization, which is dynamic and open-ended. The social identity is characterized by the conformity and the constraints. The conformity refers to the rule, expectation, and behavior requirements imposed by the society, while constraints denotes the limitations of these norms that imposed on the individual's self-view. These conformities become constraints on the pursuit of the protagonist's literary dream, because the protagonist, like Eugene, he wants to be a writer. He likes writing. Now this opposing the authenticity and the pursuit of his self-identity. So on the train journey to university, Eugene faced an intense conflict between self-identity and social identity. The train as a mobile space serves as a metaphor for identity. And the last part of this article also analyzes deconstruction of train imagery. Firstly, it's deconstructing the spatial boundaries. So it is breaking the fixed hierarchy of a center and periphery, enabling the mutual transformation of the central status of a hometown and the city, and constructing a pluralistic and symbolic spatial network. It blurs the absolute division between static and dynamic space, which forms the cognition of flowing space. And then it deconstructing identity boundaries. It's dissolving the fixed nature of identity, highlighting its mobility and constructiveness. It also promotes the transformation of identity from a closed label to an open process through spatial conversation and experience accumulation. So finally, let's give a conclusion of this article. So the train imagery breaks the rigid boundary of binary opposition in space and identity. And the analysis is based on Grimm's semiotic square and deconstruction to reveal the pluralistic and fluid nature of space and identity in Thomas Wolfe's novel. So for the value of a theory, theoretical methods is it is verified the effectiveness of interdisciplinary theories. It combines semiotics and deconstructionism in literary imaginary analysis. And for the practical meaning, it provides a new perspective for literary creation and imagery research. But there are still some limitations in this article. This article mainly focuses on the two co-novels of Thomas Wolfe. Now there are still some other works of Thomas Wolfe. So for the future study, it can extend to the short stories or post-nom works of Thomas Wolfe novel. And this is the end of this test. Thank you.